Good morning.
Good morning, Roshi.
You're doing pretty well on that bench. How about you? Would you like that chair over there? Or are you feeling okay? It's so nice to have some newcomers with us. Thank you for coming. And it's a bit daunting, morning service, for your first time at the Zen Center. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Feel free to come back on another day when we don't do the full morning service, and then feel your way. Come back whenever you can. We're happy to have you. And it's so nice to have Shikan here. He said to me this morning, "Oh, you're in HD." I'm like, "What's HD?" Well, we've been meeting together on Zoom all the time he was in the university, what was it, in Los Angeles?
Southern California.
Yeah, and then his time in Japan. And so this is the first time we're actually seeing each other, and I guess we are in HD.
Yeah.
Very nice to have you here. He's staying for a few days. So here we are, August 2nd. The last weeks of summer. Strange as it has been. It's kind of a confirmation of all the things we know about the climate crisis. We just have to look at what's happening around the globe. Terrifying fires. People seeking to escape terrible political situations. And all the regimes that are now so authoritarian, pushing people away, closing down systems of aid. And of course, right here, starting summer session, not able to breathe with the smoke coming down, the smoke from the Canadian wildfires. Starting session with windows closed and masks on. In case we don't know what's going on, hello, it will come again. This is a temporary, I'll use the word advisedly, breather. So what do? We come here. We come here and we practice ardently. Not thinking, oh, I'll have some peace of mind for a little while, but realizing how crucial it is to wake up, to know, to be able to act coming from the mind of wisdom and compassion. And so we had a great summer session. Smoke eventually dispersed, but from the very beginning, it was phenomenal. Session is a long retreat. And we chanted Mandala Day, Lotus Sutra. We chanted for Hoenji Day, Shurangama Sutra, Ryogonshu. And we've been reading Shurangama Sutra at our Sunday Dharma study meetings. Shurangama Sutra, translation of the title is Sutra of the Indestructible. In our daily lives, we are certainly aware of what is impermanent, transient, destructible. Sutra of the Indestructible. And as most of you know, we've been studying it since January of 2024, winter session. So about 2.5 years, right? It's now the summer of 26, I believe. So quite a long time we've been really looking into it, appreciating it. And as I have told you, very few Buddhist centers in the United States even know about it. When I went to the American Zen Teachers Conference in Vermont earlier this summer, I found out that people were very interested about hearing more about it, but didn't use it in their temple's practice. In East Asia and South Asia, especially among Chan Buddhists in China, the Shurangama Sutra is right up there with the Lotus Sutra. Very important. And as I said, chapter 25, Lotus Sutra, we chant on Mandala Day. So this Ryogonshu chanting, Shurangama Sutra's esoteric chapter, it's part 8 of this sutra, which many of you have been reading. How many of you have been reading this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that's a start, isn't it? That's a start. I had, for many years, wanted to know more about this sutra, having chanted Ryogonshu every spring kessei at Daibasatsu Zendo. And then at that winter session, some of you may remember I did the koan 16 Bodhisattvas in the Bath. And that story, that koan, is in the Shurangama Sutra. And so I thought, well, I have to really dig into this. And I found myself with this koan bathing in the Shurangama Sutra. It was such an extraordinary feeling to start really getting to know each passage. And this particular edition was translated in 2009 by the Buddhist Text Translation Society with commentary by a really remarkable Chan master, Shanhua. He gave lectures on this sutra at a 90-day retreat at San Francisco Zen Center in 1968. So that was his way of bringing it to American practitioners. But it didn't seem to be taken up after that time. The underlying theme of this sutra, the Heart Sutra, the Diamond Sutra is what?
True mind.
True mind. And And how do we encounter that true mind? I gave you a hint by saying Heart Sutra and Diamond Sutra. How do we encounter that true mind? How do we dwell within that true mind?
With a mind that lights on nothing whatsoever.
Nothing whatsoever. In other words, regarding the self.
No self.
So this fundamental emptiness, everything we take to be fixed, substantial, unchanging. What is the mind that considers everything around you to be that way, including all of your thoughts and desires and aversions? Conditioned mind. And in this sutra, one of the sections really speaks very deeply about conditioned mind and true mind. When we see the impermanence of things out there, for example, Shoen made a most wonderful bouquet of flowers from all around here on these acres. And the vase is now in the meeting room, and it's so beautiful. And little petals are falling. And maybe it will still be more or less as it is, but with a few fewer petals by Tuesday, maybe not. We don't know. But it's a reminder, isn't it? We think we have some sort of special grace that we will continue on in these bodies for some period of time. How long do you think you have? Ungo checked his watch. His watch is gone. Therefore, going, right? Going. What happens when we really embrace this sincerely?
Become alive.
We become alive. Life, death becomes one, as Dogen put it. Here, for this moment. Don't even begin to assume there is another moment. So, when we see this, when we begin to really take it to heart, and looking at nature is a good way to do that, especially now with everything at risk so evidently. When we begin to do that, how extraordinary everything is. This planet is on its way out. Not to speak of all of us. How much care we feel is warranted when we feel that truly. Care for each other, care for all beings, even those we don't like. The mind of preference, the mind of, as I said, clinging and aversion, is usually the mind we think is real. And when we do, we exclude a lot. There's, in the introduction to the Shinge Sutra, I'm sure many of you remember Ron Epstein and David Rounds, the co-chairs of the translation committee, said, sustained contemplation of the emptiness of the self can extricate us from ego-centered experience. This is a really important statement because we often feel that we are condemned to living by ego-centered experience. That's all we know. We believe in the self. Don't bother me about anything else. Very typical. And they continue, and liberate us from the prison of selfishness. I am sure that every single person in this room considers herself, himself, themselves to be working as hard as possible to be generous, to think of others, not to fall into selfishness. And yet, it's tricky, isn't it? When you start looking at what's going on in the mind, how much of that is fixed and focused on what?
Self.
Yeah. So they said, we learn to see ourselves and our concerns, our desires and fears as empty. Like a mirage or a dream, as ephemeral as a bubble or a flash of lightning, as it's put in the ending verse of Diamond Sutra. Petals fall. And then there's this wonderful passage. Emptying ourselves opens us up to the fullness of the world. If you ever feel as though you're looking through a glass darkly, as the saying goes, it's because you're so overwhelmingly caught up in your own preferences, your own ideas, your own fears, your own emotions of various kinds. So we can't see the fullness of the world. Or we see the fullness of the world out there as something somehow is not part of who we are. So we can destroy it with impunity. I'm not suggesting that's true of anyone here, but there is that mentality. Emptying entails eliminating the boundaries that we have drawn to cope with the world. These coping skills that we've learned in order to be a little more comfortable, they don't work. They work temporarily, but they really don't work. The walls we erect to protect ourselves, the turf we stake out to rule, and the fantasies of future conquests that we map in our minds. This can be understood on a very subtle level, okay? I'm not suggesting that we are ready to go to war to protect our individual way of life, but there is a subtle thing that goes on for everyone. Not only what's in it for me, but how is this going to affect me? What else? Emptying ourselves must lead to the emptying of the other, quote unquote, so that self and other are no longer two. Then there is no conflict, no longer anything to fear or to gain. Now this sounds pretty good theoretically. That's the issue, right? We're very good at making a concept out of whatever the truth being offered to us is. And we can't do it that way. It just doesn't work. We can write papers, even books, but that core truth is missing. And the core truth, then they put it this way: with enlightenment comes the realization that true emptiness is identical to the fullness of wondrous existence. It can be reached through the hard work of becoming aware of every single thought and emptying them one by one. It is hard work, isn't it? The thoughts come up. We believe in the thoughts. We don't want to empty them. And so it's not just a matter of theoretically, as I said, denying emptiness and impermanence, but it's becoming aware of the freedom that is right here, accessible to everyone. Now, in the Heart Sutra, it starts out, we read the English today, Avalokiteshvara, compassion, doing deep prajna paramita. What is that? Doing deep prajna paramita. What is that? Deep prajna paramita. Sitting. True, sitting. Not sitting, oh, when is the bell going to ring? Not sitting, what am I going to do later after I get out of this place? Just prajna paramita, the wisdom mind. Doing that, clearly saw the emptiness of all 5 skandhas. All 5 skandhas. Thus transcending, this word transcending, it's always a problematic word. Let's say, thus being liberated within from misfortune and suffering. And the 5 skandhas, probably everybody remembers them, but it's good to say. The Shurangama Sutra warns us. When we think the 5 skandhas have independent reality, drawn into what is seen, heard, smelled, tasted, felt, and thought is with them, then we're trapped in the frenzy of reactivity, fear, and anger. We're trapped. We don't have to live that way. That's the whole point of our practice. No matter what's happening, whether we're sleepy, whether we can hear or not, whether we are uncomfortable, it doesn't matter. What matters?
This.
Right here. This. The sutra teaches, turn the light around and illumine yourself within. Then you can be free from aversion and clinging, as the Buddha taught in the Second Noble Truth. The section of the Shurangama Sutra that we looked at last Dharma study last week was called Visual Awareness is Not Dependent Upon Conditions. Your mind makes distinctions about light and darkness and the other phenomena, but the essence of your visual awareness does not make these distinctions. And there's a statement by the Buddha at the end of that section Know then, K-N-O-W, that your mind is fundamentally wondrous, luminous, and pure. Now, this is, someone might say, a matter of what? What is it to know that and live by that? Huh? Experiencing that and trusting in that. Trust is so important. To trust in that, even when everything in your life is signaling the opposite. To trust in that. You, Buddha says, have confused yourself and have lost track of what is fundamental. Constantly drifting and drowning, you have become submerged in the sea of death and rebirth. That is why the thus come one, referring to himself, says, you are to be pitied. Once we really feel that keenly, what does it make us do? I don't want to be the object of pity, do I? No, no. What am I doing that Buddha says you are to be pitied? Really, how can I change? So every sutra is about changing your mind. We're very good at saying, oh, I'll change my mind about that. I don't think I'll go to that restaurant. Change your mind. As you know from all the scientific studies and from what His Holiness the Dalai Lama says again and again, there's nothing fixed about the brain. Even the brain is malleable, depending on what you do, right? What do you do? Well, I wanted to give you a contemporary example of that kind of change. We have someone who comes to clean for us once a month, do heavy cleaning. And she works for a number of people in the community. Just really, she herself is a very spiritual person, uneducated, deeply sensitive, and always linking people in some way. She used to work for Robert Blumenthal and brought some of his Buddhist books here. And she told me about a Buddhist practitioner, a neighbor of people she cleans for. Their names are Karen Richards and David Clifford. Her name was Kathleen K. Cloud. She used K, K-A-Y. She was born July 20th, 1949. She died January 11th of this year. And evidently was an extraordinarily brilliant and creative person. She had a BS in computer science with an emphasis on computer graphics and math, and was absolutely driven in her professional life. She was a software engineer and digital artist known for her technical work at NASA. What's NASA? Everyone knows NASA. The NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. That's what she worked for. She also worked for Walt Disney Animation Studios. So at NASA, she was a graphic systems software engineer from May 1984 to September 1994, and later as a manager of simulations for the Hypercube project. You know the Hypercube project? You do? I won't ask. And she left there and went to Disney Animation. She transitioned into computer graphics and shader writing. You know shader writing? Contributing to major animated films such as Frozen. You've heard of Frozen? For which she was a generalist technical director. In 1999, she was nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Visual Effects in a Miniseries or Movie for Max Q, Emergency Landing. No one here has seen. Anyway, quite an interesting woman. And as I said, she lived next door to Karen and David. They helped take care of her as she was going downward in her health for the past 2 years, but were very close friends for a long time. And Karen told me when I talked to her on the phone, she was so humble. She never spoke of her accomplishments. She told me a little when I asked, but I learned most about them from her former colleagues and going through her records after she died. Karen also said she was a very talented artist and loved drawing pictures of neighbors' beloved pets. Animals loved her. She'd leave her door open for our cat, who visited her for hours almost every day. Now, this person, Kay, had a very traumatic childhood. She endured years with an extremely abusive parent. And she came away from that with overwhelming anger. And I intuit that it was that anger that drove her in her professional work. She never married, had one sister, according to Karen, who's basically on the streets in Alaska. Somehow she found Buddhism and became a diligent practitioner. She taught herself Tibetan, not easy, and spent time in Tibet. And something happened. Her mind, her heart, it changed. The anger subsided. By the time Karen and David knew her, they said she was so peaceful. And she told Karen, Buddhist practice saved my life. She was so sick in recent years, she couldn't go out, she couldn't breathe, she had 2 oxygen tanks. So she couldn't go to this temple, for example, even though she did know about us. And as she realized that her death was near, she asked Karen to see that her Buddhist tankas, books, and all kinds of practice materials go to the Zen Center. And I asked Shoen, who has both the Tibetan and Zen practice, to go through everything. And we thought what we'll do is have a small service for her on a Thursday evening in August and display some of these remarkable things, and Karen and David will attend. I will also make a lantern for her at Obon, at Daibusatsu. So the night she died, she removed the oxygen, sat upright in meditation, and was found that way by Karen and David the next morning. They looked out the window, and there was her favorite cardinal, sitting on a branch, looking at them. This is perhaps an extreme story, but all of us suffer from variations on this theme of anger, of fear, of emotional upsets in various ways. And I just want to share this with you and share the perspective of the Shurangama Sutra and of His Holiness the Dalai Lama and many other wise people in this suffering world. We do have what it takes. We just have to do it.